You think that you are in control of your life, but you are not. Every decision you make, what you chase, what you avoid, even what you love, is being silently dictated by a game happening inside you. It is called the game of ego, and most people die without even realizing who was actually playing the game in their life. If you can close your eyes and look within yourself, there is a sense of I-ness, there is a sense of identification. When somebody praises you, you get happy. When somebody criticizes you, you get sad and you get angry. So, there is something within us which is controlling our life, and it is controlling how we react to life. This is called ego. In Vedanta, it is described as ahankara. Ahankara comes from two separate words, which is aham and kara. Aham means I, or that I-ness, and kara means the maker. So ahankara literally means the maker of I. And this I or ego or ahankara is always present within us. It is so close to us. It is taking every decision. It is creating different outcomes of our life, and it is basically determining how we are actually living our lives without us being even aware of it. It is so close to us that we do not recognize it. But the recognition of the ego is the most important thing that we must do in life as per the ancient Vedantic wisdom. Now, when we say ahankara or the ego, immediately you might think that it is something which is negative, it is something to be get rid of, and it is not essential. But that's definitely not true. Ahankara or ego, it comes with life experience. It is always there as long as we have the body, as long as we have the mind. Ego comes with it. And not just that, it is built into us for our own survival. When we were evolving as a species, when we were hunters and gatherers in the forests, it is this ego that kept us alive. The strong identification with the body helped us protect ourselves and save ourselves when some danger came. So, every animal, every bird, every living organism has a sense of identity. It tries to survive, it tries to protect itself, it tries to take care of its own offsprings, and it feels that it has a boundary. All of this is the game of ego. It is simply a game, and this ego is essential for us to play the game of life as professionals, as entrepreneurs, even as spiritual seekers. Ego is the only thing that we have on which we can work upon to transform our life. This ego or identity is our swabhava, our nature, and fighting this ego is not a solution. In my own life, as I began exploring the wisdom of Vedanta and other spiritual teachings many years ago, I went through a lot of mental turmoil. Every single day I was judging myself. Whenever a negative thought comes, why is this happening? Whenever I feel something, why am I not able to get rid of this ego? Why is this ego still there? When will I ever be free of this? This itself became such a grueling process within me that it was painful. And finally, after going deep into the Vedantic wisdom and after speaking to many great teachers, I realized that ego will always be there. It will continue to be there as long as the body is there. So the goal here is not to fight the ego, but is to disidentify from the ego, just to create the separation from who we are, and that ego or identity is the game for us. That is how we can win this game. And not just that, this particular video is about understanding how this game is being played within you. And this video is very, very important for you to understand the subtleties of ego, how it manipulates you, how it plays you, and how it always keeps you stuck and will never allow you to experience your wholeness, your fullness, and that infinite potential. Because when you are truly liberated, when you identify and recognize yourself for who you are one with that infinite consciousness. That is the death of the ego, and that is where the game ends. But the ego is not ready to die. It will never be ready to die, and it never wants us to stop playing this game. And the great Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, one of the greatest beings who walked on this planet, gave us this framework of looking at the three aspects of ego or the three categories of ego. At first, there is the tamasic ego, then there is the rajasic ego, then there is sattvic ego. These are different types of ego that exist within each and every one of us. Let us take a look at each of these egos one by one. So the tamasic ego represents dullness or darkness. It is an aspect of us which is strongly identified with laziness, with non-activity, with lethargy, and so on. The tamasic ego is close to all knowledge and wisdom. It cannot accept change or growth. It believes its suffering is permanent and unavoidable. This is the lowest form of ego, which is identified with laziness, dullness, and a tendency to blame others instead of taking responsibility. So all these three aspects of ego exist within us. The degree to which they exist and the proportion of them may vary from a person to person. But it's crucial to understand what they are and how they control our behavior and choices and in turn our life itself. Now let's come to the Rajasic ego. This is better than the Tamasic ego, but every ego bounces at some level. So the Rajasic ego sees the world as a race to be won. It requires external validation, awards, titles, degrees, money, praise, power. All of this is what the Rajasic ego seeks to make itself feel worthy and to make itself feel that it's important. So this is the nature of the Rajasic ego. This is common in most of us who are professionals and entrepreneurs, who are driven, who are ambitious. We seek recognition and power and success. So this is the Rajasic ego within us, which strongly seeks validation from the external reality. This ego is driven by ambition and the obsession with the result of action. Rajasic ego is very much identified and attached to the outcomes of its action. While this ego is productive and it can lead to worldly success and prosperity, it also has a lot of downsides. It brings in stress and pressure and anxiety and burnout, and it is constantly in an endless loop of search. Whenever it achieves something, it is never satisfied. It seeks for the next thing for it to achieve. But after that comes the sattvic ego, which is much more evolved, much more sophisticated, and much more subtle. Sattvic ego does not claim ownership of the results. It says, I am the servant of God, or I am just an instrument. It is also much more detached compared to the other egos, but still this is not the end. You know, Swami Vivekananda called this the golden chain. The tamasic ego might be a steel chain and the sattvic ego might be a golden chain, but still it is a chain, and a chain binds us. Our goal ultimately should not be to wear a golden chain instead of a silver chain or a steel chain, but it should be to get rid of all chains and be eternally free. Now, this sattvic ego is the final form of ego. It is the last stage before the final disidentification. But first of all, like I mentioned, we need to understand that we can never get rid of the ego. Ego can only be transformed from tamasic to rajasic and finally to sattvic, which is more humble. But ultimately, ego still exists. Even for enlightened masters, ego will continue to exist. So, the true spiritual freedom is not a battle to destroy the ego, but it is a journey of disidentification. You just disidentify from the ego and recognize yourself as something which is infinite, which is truly blissful, and which was never the ego to begin with. When you master your ego, you realize I am not the one who is angry, I am the one who is aware of the anger. You become untouched by the ego's movements while still being able to use it as a tool. This is when you begin to play the game of life. This understanding of what reality is and what ego is and the different aspects of the ego and different categories of the ego is so important, because with all of this understanding you begin to play the game of life within the world of Maya, and you are no longer controlled by the ego. You are free now. You understand that ego continues to exist and you are the infinite consciousness. Now you begin to play the game consciously instead of unconsciously. You are free within this game and you begin to evolve yourself with this wisdom. You begin to transform your ego. If it is too much tamasic, you transform it to rajasic. If it is too much rajasic, you then transform it to sattvic. But then throughout this journey, you will disidentify from it and begin to look at this as a game that you're playing. And you will realize that you were never in the game, but the entire game was an appearance within you. That's the goal for us. We need to be very, very conscious of the ego. At the tamasic level, when the ego is too tamasic, it says, I'm not responsible for my life. My circumstances are responsible for my life. That person did that to me. This person did something to me. So everyone is bad. I'm good. And the entire blame is on someone else. So that is the nature of the tamasic ego, which we need to transcend. It's a very dangerous place to be, where we do not take responsibility for our lives and we become victims of our life. After that comes Rajasic ego, which is much more sophisticated. It takes responsibility, but still it takes the credit also. It works hard, it achieves success, it even does charity, but from a different place. And there is a lot of ambition and drive, and along with this comes stress, anxiety, and burnout at this level. But then when we come to the sattvic ego, still the ego plays its game, because the ego never wants to die. Nobody wants to die. It wishes to preserve its identity in whatever way possible. Here the ego says, I'm so spiritual now. I'm not rajasic anymore, I'm not tamasic anymore, I'm not lazy, and I'm not driven by greed and ambition. This is the ego of a spiritual seeker, where we tend to see ourselves as someone who is much more evolved and who is better than others. This is a very common phenomenon. When we understand Vedanta, the ego says, I'm understanding Vedanta. I know so much. And finally, when you understand the game of ego and how the ego keeps playing through this video, your ego might say in a subtle way, now I understand the game of ego. I know so much more than anyone else. So just be conscious of this. There is always a game that your ego is playing, and it will continue to play this game because that is the nature of the ego. But the more we can detach from it and witness it from a distance and recognize our nature for something apart from it, the more power we take from the ego, and the more fulfilled, the more joyful, and the more blissful we can become. This is why understanding the game of ego is very important, to take control of your life and not to let the external circumstances and events affect your internal state of being. Just imagine that power where you can just sit with yourself whether your eyes closed or not, being completely detached from the ego and the external world, where you can say that no matter what happens in my external reality, that does not affect me. I dictate my reality, and I will never let my reality dictate my internal state of being. So that is the place of true power that we must aspire for.